Hey guys, this is Brad from Blue Nile Farm. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about composting manure. This is one of the things I do all the time throughout the year. And for a lot of people, manure turns out to be either a nuisance, or for some of the bigger farmers, they wind up spreading in their fields as a source of fertilizer. And a lot of gardeners really seek out good composted manure. And I found out from my farm that it becomes to be a very valuable income stream. So today I'm going to show you kind of what I do to manage my piles, and basically throughout this early spring to all the way to fall, I wind up selling the manure as compost for gardens. So I'm going to show you the composting process, what I do, and what I do pretty much routinely throughout the year. And it is March. We're having a really beautiful day out today, and I'm going to jump on the excavator and do some turning of piles. But today I want to try to show you, right behind me is manure that is basically fresh. And a lot of people that are gardeners will go out and just grab anything and throw it onto their gardens. And what happens is the manure is not broken down well enough, and it'll consist of hay, manure, and bedding, and basically turns to be so hot that it basically kills your plants. So the key here is to take it through a composting process, break it down, have it burn off the heat, and basically make those nutrients really valuable to your soil as a soil amendment. And that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to take you through the process of turning piles, show you what I do, and how to take raw manure and turn it into what they call black gold as another income source for a small farmer. And if you're a gardener, you should really do this because it really makes a big difference. Now, pile size has a lot to do with it. If you've got a really tiny pile, it's going to take a lot longer than, say, a bigger pile because of the amount of heat that's generated from this. But I'm going to show you the process and what we do, and also just to show you, if you're a small farm, you can use this for yourself or turn it into cash as an income stream. And I'll take you through what we do. So stay tuned. So this pile behind me is probably a couple 100 yards, and it's been sitting probably for a good 4 to 5 months probably since November. And what I want to do today is kind of get in here and flip it up again and get the composting process working. And I also like to make it higher personally, because I know the bigger, the better the pile, the quicker it heats up. And I don't have an automatic turner, so unless I use the excavator. So I'm going to just take this pile, kind of fluff it up, and get some of that broken down hay and stuff in here that'll be burned off in about a month or so. So the quicker I get this flipped, the quicker the process will go, and the outside material will get back into the center of the pile and break down some more. And that's kind of the goal here, is to keep mixing this up, changing the heat, changing the moisture patterns, bringing oxygen into the pile to actually get it to start breathing again and get those microorganisms working to break down the process. You know, a lot of these, like I said, this is last year's manure, and I'm going to show you another pile here that we're going to hit, and it's been here for about 2 to 3 years, and it was predominantly all hay. So let me show you that pile. So this pile behind me here was pretty much a lot of round bales and straw that were really rotting, and I wound up putting them into this mix, and it has a little bit of wood chips to it, some manure, but pretty much a lot of it is hay based. And it took about 3 years, and I keep flipping this pile, and it's really pretty nice. And I'm probably going to wind up using that manure itself and that compost as a topsoil blend, where I'll mix it in with topsoil and run it through the screener and kind of create more organic matter into the topsoil itself. And it'll kind of like bulk it up, but also give it some more value to it, kind of like pre-adding it. So, you know, each pile that I make has a specific goal or objective, you know, and anything can pretty much be composted. And, you know, I'm going to kind of talk about that process as we go. But this is a pile that we're going to also flip, and it's pretty well broken down. There might be some bigger pieces in there, like I see some wood from, they came from the wood chips that's sitting in there. I'll pull that out. But, you know, as far as cleaning up the bulky stuff, that's where the screening process comes in. And anything in the screening process that's not broken back down, we'll put it back into the pile and let it break down some more. And it kind of works out pretty nicely. And if there's any matter in there, like plastic or string from bales or net wrap, it'll be caught by the screener and be removed. So if I wind up selling the material or mixing it in the topsoil, it's not going to be a contaminant or just junk that shouldn't be in there. I like to sell my material clean, and I want my customers to be pretty happy. So, you know, everything's a little bit different, but these are 2 piles that we're going to flip today, and let's go see another pile. Here's a pile that came from another horse farm. It wasn't my pile. I wound up removing it, And predominantly it's mostly sawdust with horse mixture in it. But some of these horse farms, and you need to be kind of aware, they waste a lot of bedding. It's amazing. It's really, the amount of bedding, the manure is pretty high. Whereas on my farm, we use pelleted bedding, and our ratio of manure to actually the wood products is real small, and that makes a huge difference. It gives you a better concentration and better quality, and that's kind of why I've actually been relatively pretty successful in my manure business, is because the quality that I'm selling, and a lot of gardeners swear by my product, and that's kind of what I like to do. And it works out really good for me, and it's turned into a good income stream. But you learn along the process of how to do things. And I'm trying to get myself into a temperature probe. That'll be my next thing, maybe this year, where I can really start regulating this. And I will kind of talk more about some of that stuff when I'm on the excavator. But again, I love doing this. I've been doing this for about 7-8 years. It turned out to be it started off really small, and it really grew from here. And it's a small scale operation, and that's the way I like it. But I want to produce quality stuff, and when I'm sold out, I'm sold out, and it works out real well. And it's a way for me to get rid of my material and really start to make my operation a little bit more cost effective. Because part of the key to having any kind of agricultural operation is to diversify, and the more income streams you can create, the better you'll be. Because if one's failing, you got another one that's moving ahead. And as far as this process of manure and these types of sales, it's always been a positive for me, and it's done really well. And I've never had a problem selling my product. And if I do, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't go to waste. It's one of these products that you can keep year after year after year. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's kind of cool. So, but this is, again, a pile that we're going to flip, and I'll kind of show you how that's working out. And that's what's nice about flipping piles too, is you actually get to see the type of activity that's in a pile and how it's actually forming. And it works out better, because you can kind of regulate what's going on. And it's nothing better than looking at it as well broken down. Now this pile here is pretty unique in the sense that it is not a manure pile. Really, what this is that I've spread wood chips out on my pastures, and horses poop on it, as they walk on it. It's really to keep them out of the mud. And what I wind up doing is taking a bunch of wood chips, and I wind up letting it heat up, and then I run it through the screener. And this is actually the fines that I made out of the wood chip pile. And this is probably almost 2 years old at least, and it was really always hot. It's kind of like mulch, and it actually is mulch, really. And it works out real well. But I started to get a lot of worms in the last year, but I just saw it was a little bit hot, and they never really marketed it last year. This year I might bag it and sell it as a bag product, because I think it'll work out really well for a lot of gardeners, and something that's unique. And it's really nice and fine. It's like a mixture. It looks like topsoil and dirt, and it's like sand. I mean, it's such a nice little dirt blend. I mean, people will think that that's actually dirt. And I really like that, and it's really cold to the touch. And I know that this pile is cold, so it'll be a great marketing product for this year. And I think people will really like it as a soil amendment. But it's something different, and that's why I'm always trying to think out of the box of things that I can create, through the composting process, and different blends that customers may really like, and it might take off for them. So this is just some of the process that I really enjoy doing. It's something a little bit different from traditional farming, but it's something that I can do at a small scale that makes customers happy, and it kind of brings them into your operation. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to get really close. But if you look at this, this is composted wood chips, but it's looks like dirt, and it feels cold like dirt. And I think it would be a great organic blend, whether you're in a potting soil or raised beds. And this is kind of how I'm going to market it, and I think people like it. And I'm pretty sure when it warms up a little bit, there's going to be a hell of a lot of worms in there too, and that's going to make it even more attracting to people. So and that's what I found last year, is the amount of worms that were actually in this stuff was great. It was really where I wanted it to be. So this wood chip pile here is basically a lot fresher, and it's basically last year's pile. It's been screened one time, and I'm sure there's going to be a mixture of, I could see a lot of more manure in this pile. I took it and scraped it out of the pasture out there, and I'm sure this thing's going to be pretty hot. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip this over and kind of get this to work as well, and kind of get a good taste of what we're actually having out here to get the process going again, because you can't flip this stuff enough. but you want to make sure it gets flipped and it gets enough heat into it, it starts to break itself down. You know, and that's just kind of why I like to get out here as quick as I can and do it. You just got to pick the right days of the year to come out here, and it makes a big difference. But you want to try to do this routinely if you can, you know, and whether you use a tractor, an excavator, backhoe, or even, that's really the best way. You can't really do this by hand. This is too big of a pile. You'd be there all day long. And but it does make a difference. And I've started off, you know, with the tractor and kind of built from there to what I have today, and it makes a big difference. So and believe me, it's having the right tools makes all the difference in the world to do things a little bit more effectively. And that also makes a lot of joy in what you do as well. So today we're going to take out my John Deere 120, and we're going to see what we can do as far as flipping piles, trying to get them to break down a little bit more. And you know, this is the fastest and easiest way to work through piles with an excavator, and you don't make as much mess because you're not moving around. And since, you know, we just got done with the thaw and the ground's all wet and sloppy, you know, it's a lot easier just to kind of use the arm and swing and be able to move piles without tracking up and making a big mess. And that's what's really nice about the excavator. All right, guys, so here we go. We're going to start hitting this pile. And what we're going to try to do is make a hole in the center, and then pull everything back into the center, because I really don't want to move my pile around. You may see this thing get a little warm, and that gives me an idea where we stand. And if it's cold, that's good too. I notice in the winter time, these piles still have heat in them, and the reason for that is, yeah, it's based on the speed of the snow melt. So it's nice with the excavators. Not only can you dig a hole, but you're actually able to move and mix every little bit of material. What I don't like is the edges. You know, the edges definitely need to get mixed around. This pile doesn't look too bad in the inside, but the outside could use a little TLC. But if it gets mixed in, it'll probably be okay. So the whole plan is to basically move every bit of your pile and just be able to keep mixing it. And every time you dig, you're exposing oxygen to the pile, you're reactivating the composting process. You can see it starting to smoke maybe, I don't know, in the video, but I'm starting to see it heat. Now if it was a cold day out, this thing would be smoking pretty good. So a lot of times I'll try to get a hole started, and I can just pull that other material back in it. And I'll take this material and throw it back on top. Now there's no rules to this. You just want to mix as much as you can and handle the material. And I find that, you know, I'm always looking as I dig is, you know, how broken down is the material that came in here. You know, this pile here had a lot of hay in it, manure, and chips. So I'm looking at all three components, and I really don't see much coming in. And all the grass and the hay is all gone. So that's a good thing. The whole objective realistically is just to make sure that your composting process is working well, and the more you can move, the better off you'll be. I'm not saying you have to move every little bit of it, but the more you can move, the better off. And the other secret too is what I wind up doing on the bottom is I started to do this because now I've had more access to wood chips, is I like to put a lot of wood chips down the bottom so you don't actually come in and start scraping off dirt. Because once you start scraping dirt, you're not going to be too happy because you're going to get clay and stuff in your blend. So I rather have chips in my blend because I know it's compostable than the clay, because some people complain about clay, and I understand, you know, that's not what they want per se. So here's a little bit of hay, not much in here. And that hay will be actually burned down after we mix this pile again. My whole goal here is just to keep mixing this pile. I'm getting the moisture back in it, because obviously there's moisture that we're pulling back into the pile, into the center. And the biggest thing is getting the oxygen back into the material as well. So everything that I'm moving, I'm going to throw right back into this pile. That's kind of my plan. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do piles. You know, what I have here is just one big pile. Sometimes I just take it from one spot and move it to another. But since I'm kind of jammed with piles in between me, I'm just trying to move it over, create a hole, and throw it back on top of the pile again. Now, sometimes, and I do have blocks, and I really am going to try to get a block system going where I have multiple bays, and I could move material from one bay to another. And a lot of times that works really good when you have a loader. The excavator will work just as good. You know, as long as the bay's not too high, I can flip it from one bay over to the other. But the bottom line is that the more you mix, the better off you'll be. And a lot of people, when they put a pile, they don't mix it. And that's one of the worst things you can do. You want to get consistent and always mix your piles. And it helps break down your pile a lot quicker as well. And I can look at the material that I'm seeing. Some of it's a little bit more broken down than others. And you can almost look at it as layers. Maybe you can see that on this video. But I see it like a little bit of layering. So the more we mix, the better the blend. But it is well broken down. Like, I know that I can sell this spring. It's not as hot as I thought it would be. And that's a good thing. So what I'm going to try to do is move this section. Then that pile that's this little pile that's in front of me that's left, I'm just going to try to pull it into and make that right, actually put that right back in the hole that I'm at. Back up a little bit. Well, you'll notice too, because the edges aren't inside the pile, they don't really get decomposed as quick. That's why it's nice to kind of get in there and blend them and mix them and even put them back into the pile. You know, I started getting into this manure gig about 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. And what happened was I had a manure spreader and I was doing like everybody else. I was throwing it out in my pasture, thinking that's all I needed to do. And then the manure spreader broke, and then I had all this manure. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with it? Then I decided, because of Craigslist, I started seeing other people advertising. So I started doing a little bit of composting on my own because I knew people would want it a little bit nicer, and it made a difference. All right, so here's what we'll do now. Since I kind of made a hole, I'm going to try to get in here, and we're going to tear out this pile that's right here. We're going to move that. We're just going to break it and throw it in here and mix it. And you just pull the outside into the center, and it'll mix itself. It doesn't have to be fancy, you just want to get this to blend. Now if you had a skid steer or if you had a tractor, you know, it's going to take a heck of a lot longer to move all this material, especially depending on the bigger size piles. But if you're a gardener and you have your own piles at home, you probably don't have piles this big. A lot of times too, when I look at hay, what I look for with the hay is to make sure that that hay is pretty well broken down, and if it's not, I try to make sure it gets in the center. And the other thing is with hay, if you have it in your piles, you want to kind of spread it out the best you can, especially if it's old stuff. And you may see that when I do another pile. And what I look for a lot of times, you'll see it white and charred, like it caught on fire inside the pile. And that really shows you that your piles are hot and they're breaking down the grass. It's funny, I expect this pile to be super hot, and I'm surprised it's not, but it's just a good thing. It's telling me that it'll be marketable easily this year. And just a little bit I mix right now, the better off I'll be. And I'm actually seeing earthworms actually inside this pile right now as well. And that's a good sign, a lot of worms. So I know this pile is going to be good. When I first started doing this, I wasn't seeing as many worms as I see now, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because I used a skid steer and I really didn't pay attention. But with the excavator, I can actually see a lot more worms and stuff in the mix. And what I try to do is not just plop a big pile. I mean, the best thing you can do is try to shake it out and get every bit of it broken down, because the finer it is, the better off it is actually. You can see how dry that center actually is. So like when we have rain and stuff, it starts to saturate this a little bit. It'll be a little bit better. And I like my piles high just because it seems like they wind up activating a little bit better. And what's interesting about composting is you can do leaves, you can do all kinds of material. Even stumps, for what it's worth. I take my stumps, I put them in a pile, and I let them decompose. And you know, a lot of the stumps, they actually have the topsoil in there. And what will happen is it'll actually break down. Probably take about anywhere from 5 to 10 years. And if you take your time with it and not worry about it, it'll actually turn into topsoil. And then obviously that's marketable. You know, in my area, I sell topsoil about $25 a yard screened. And you know, that's just instant money, because every scoop's basically 25 bucks. So it kind of pays for itself real quickly. Now, manure-wise, you know, everybody sells their manure a little different. In the way I sell it by the yard. And basically, it's basically one load with my skid steer is basically a yard, or my backhoe. And that's how I sell it. And normally I have a dump truck, and I do 10-yard loads. And then, of course, so I sell it normally around $15 a yard right now. And I used to sell it at 10, then I went up to 15. But then you have issues of delivery, because a lot of people want delivery. So the kicker on the delivery is you got to obviously charge accordingly. Now I have a semi-sized dump truck, even though it's a single axle, and I'm going to charge people, you know, on the super cheap, and if they're really close to me, you know, like 60 bucks delivery minimum, and well, $50 if you're really close, but 60 generally on certain mileage away. And you're going to have to dictate what works for you, and it all depends obviously on your fuel prices. And I have a CDL, so you know, just the plates on the truck alone in Ohio, which is where I live, it's almost $700, $800 a year. So obviously people don't realize the costs that go into, you know, driving these trucks. They think it's on the cheap. So Anyway, you can kind of see kind of how I'm doing it this way. I really didn't want to create a new pile. I wanted to use existing. So what's nice is when you work and soften this ground up, your material is going to just keep funneling down. That's why I like to throw it on the top, so it kind of comes right down. So we'll move over to this pile and start throwing that back on. So remember, a lot of the stuff that we have on top is the outside stuff. So the outside materials is what I definitely want to put more so on the inside. By doing this method here, I think it works out pretty good because every bit of it gets to break down as it falls down. There's a little bit of hay. Now that hay will probably be gone after that gets covered up by the time I actually sell this. See all that white stuff? That's actually hay. You can see how it broke down. Kind of like ash. And I like seeing ash because that breaks down. See, and part of the problem is when people make manure piles at home, a lot of times they don't actually make a pile. What they'll do is they'll start dumping stuff and spread it out. And what I think is better is to make it high and put it in a pile, personally. And the reason for that is the quicker you can get it in a pile, the quicker that hay will break down. So, like for me, I have a lot of trailers that I haul my manure with, or even in the dump truck, and it doesn't have barn doors, so it has to fall out the bottom. And what I realized is that the quicker they're in the pile, the quicker that hay breaks down, because a lot of times it gets stuck coming out of the truck. Now the biggest thing on these piles, and I just want to suggest this, and I know a lot of people don't do this, but if you are selling manure and you want to sell quality manure, you need to keep it clean. And what I mean by clean is if you got string and plastic bags and pop bottles and stuff, you don't want that in your manure. You know, you kind of want to maintain it. Like here I have a little bit of string, and I think it come from a round bale, it got stuck, and that's why the string is there. And I'll probably get that string out at some point. I can see it hanging. See if I can pull some of it out. Stuck in here. Tell you, it's like 50 degrees out here today. We've been cold for so long, and this is probably one of the nicest days we've had, I think. Just a pretty sunny day. And it's kind of like I got the itch. That's kind of why I'm sitting on this excavator, to kind of get something done. I got all kinds of repairs to take place. And I think if you follow my channel, my barn came down that I run my hay operation out of, and that's caused us nothing but problems and financial hardship. And I'm planning on putting up a new building. So I'm in the market right now of figuring out what I'm doing, and I'm looking like I'm going to be putting up two buildings. And one for a hay operation, the other one's the indoor arena for the horse operation. And trying to get things done because we have a big barn to clean up. I still got hay exposed to the weather. And the other problem with the hay is that I really don't want to compost it or lose it. But, you know, I'm not going to lose any money on anything that I have. So, you know, even if I took a round bale and I have to compost it, it's going to make me money one way or the other, probably not as much. Because, you know, the composting aspect with breaking down hay, depending on how, if it's predominantly a lot of hay, it's taken me several years. And we're going to work the next pile is actually one that had a lot of hay. So there's several hundred yards in this. There's at least, yeah, probably 150, 200 yards into this pile. So now if you have a skid steer or a backhoe, you may not, obviously you're not going to be able to pile it like this. What you need to do is pile it as high as you can and make it where it breaks itself down. I think higher piles are better, and unless you have a turner, which most people don't have because they're very expensive, you know, even if you keep your piles at least 5-6 foot tall, that's okay. Just be able to keep them tall and be able to flip them like this. See, I still see hay from last year that wasn't broken down, and I'm actually uncovering it right now. And by breaking it up and spreading it out, it's actually going to be better. You can see that hay, the manure there is a little fresher. That was last year's hay, that manure that I threw in. So generally, if you wind up managing, how long does it take to actually compost manure? You know, people ask that question a lot, and they want to know how old the manure is. You know, whether it's a year old, 5 years old, or 2 years old, the bottom line is if you manage it properly, you can compost it if it has adequate oxygen, moisture, and heat in 6 months. But you have to actually put the time and effort in, and a lot of people don't. They just make a big pile and they let it sit. So it's going to take longer, and you may not have the quality that you're looking for either. You know, because I know what people are looking for, and they want to have material that they can manage, that's aged, that's not hot, and it's not going to, you know, burn their plants. And I've had people come, I always invite people to come look at it before I sell it, because I want them to have peace of mind. You know, and a lot of times too, you can go to like Tractor Supply and stuff and you could buy it there, but a lot of people are dissatisfied with that, sometimes those products as well, and a lot of people like to buy it locally. So, you know, there is a market for manure, and you know, we sell it in bulk because it's the easiest, but I'm also planning on bagging it too, because I have, you know, a lot of people are getting into square foot gardening, and people that order it in bulk, they want to buy, you know, if I offer 10 yards for 150, or we'll say at $15 a yard, and I have delivery, they're going to take as much as possible, because, you know, delivery is delivery. I don't care if it's 5 yards or 10 yards, you know, I'm going to charge you the same amount of money because I have the fuel and the time to get there. So most people realize it's actually in their favor to just buy in bulk. And what's nice about manure, if they do buy in bulk, you know, they can keep it the following year if they want, and they always have a supply. The other thing I've realized also in selling compost / manure is that people buy for a year or two and then they'll disappear on you. And the reason for that is because they only need so much, and then once they have enough soil amendments to their soil, they'll disappear. It's not that you lost a customer or the quality's bad, it's just that they only need it for so long until they need to readjust. The other thing I realized too is most people that run gardens that are saying that they need soil amendment, none of them ever do soil tests on their gardens. And I think that's a big mistake as well, because if they would do a soil test, they kind of really know what they need. And a lot of them don't. And unfortunately, that kind of hurts them as well, because they may need lime and other things as well. And if you have an extension service in your area, you know, I would suggest, and I tell them that that's what they should do. I'm not trying to lose business, but the bottom line is a lot of people have bad soils and they don't mind, you know, pumping it up a bit with soil amendments. And that's why this stuff really works out good. The kicker is how much do you put into your topsoil, into your existing, you know, soil, because a lot of people really don't know. They just take a stab. And I know there's a lot of different methods that are out there on the market right now. Even just watching YouTube, you know, about gardening and different ways people, you know, do what their gardens and their methodologies. Tell you, I see worms all over my pile. It's great. Tell you what, I love seeing that. It just tells me that something's going on and it's going on correctly. I'm using a ditching bucket, because this ground's soft and I'm not really digging. I'm just scooping and pushing. So I'm going to try to get this outside edge, put it in the center, break it up a little bit. Then I'm going to pull that outside edge that's left, pile that up, and then we'll be done with this pile. And I don't mind having residual on the ground. Like I say, there's a lot of wood chips underneath me right now, and I just kind of move it, and then whatever I don't use, we'll use it in another area. But I really try and, unlike I have in the past about ripping out clay, that's why I'm really trying to put chips on the bottom. And I think it makes a big difference for myself to do that. Alright, move up. So the other thing too is in this area, we got like melt and drain. See, here's a big example of outside grass hay. And we're going to try to put that in the center. You can see a big pile right here. And this is the stuff that we're trying to spread it out and burn it out. It's all going to be on the outside generally, because again, it doesn't get exposed to the inner. But I'll tell you, it's amazing how fast that hay actually burns out, and especially when it's fresh. You know, like reason why we pile up, and when I started the intro to this video, I wound up showing you a picture of piles that are full of hay, because that stuff will catch on fire inside that pile and burn down very quickly. And if you don't do that, you're kind of making a mistake. So sometimes I go get hay from, or manure from other horse farm, and they, like I say, they waste so much bedding that it's just amazing to me. But the problem is, a lot of times they also have the hay in there too, but it doesn't look like this. It doesn't have the blend, because it's too much bedding. It's almost looking like wood chips. And that'll be one of the next piles what we'll get to, that I'll show you what that actually looks like. So you can see this is when you get in the inner, you can see how clean and nice it looks. And then when you get to the outer, a little bit more hay, a little bit more debris. And this is why mixing is very, very important, because you're really recirculating your piles you're going to make them where, you know, you're going to have more uniformity. So what I'm going to do, so we're going to move over and then try to push this pile over. So you can see all this wood chips and stuff that I'm coming onto right now, and there's just a lot of chips. When I used to have just a tractor, you were really limited on when you could do this. And that's why if you have a bay system, and say you have gravel where you can go in and out of a bay, works out real well. So my future plans are to actually get roofs made for some of my compost piles, especially the finished piles. So then when I'm ready to sell, whether I'm bagging it or I'm selling it to somebody, that they have easy access to it, and that'll make life a little bit easier for everybody. And let's move it up. I want to cover this hay that's sitting here. Very happy this pile's not as high as I was expecting. I was afraid, because I'll tell you, in the wintertime you watch, you can tell how hot your piles are by how quick the snow melts. You know, we'll have a snowstorm, and then I'm looking outside, I'm like, all right, which are the hot piles? And this pile and another one, they're a little hotter than I was hoping for, but they're actually looking pretty good right now, and they're not nearly as hot as I expected. And that's a good thing. I do think, though, getting into composting, even if you're going to use it for yourself, there's a lot of benefits to it. And I do think if you're going to sell it, it's a really good income stream if you are, you know, doing a farm. And the more general you are, the better. You know, some people are really particular. They think cow manure is better than horse manure. I honestly don't really think it makes that much difference personally. But it all really comes down to what your blend is and how well you manage it. Because the bottom line is this: if you go out, you know, like somebody will say, well, you have weeds. Well, I'll tell you what, if my stuff is growing and it's fertile, you're going to have weeds. And weeds actually aren't really created always from the manure. A lot of times they're created by, you know, coming through the air through pollination and so forth. So it's not always related to be that. And the biggest thing that, like I say, I think if you prepare good quality manure, and you make it where it's dry, or like dry meaning, you know, processed properly and you know, broken down, you're going to definitely have no problem with, no matter what kind of compost or manure you use. But if it's hot and you kill your plants, no matter what you do, people are going to complain. And even just mixing manure, fresh manure with topsoil, you can actually make it too hot, and you're going to be very dissatisfied with the results. The only downfall with my little 120 here, which isn't, you know, it's a medium-sized excavator, is I don't have as much reach as some of these bigger machines. So I kind of have to kind of get closer to get rid of some of this pile. Well, we're going to be working on another pile right next to it here in a second. A lot of times I use a skid steer to do a better cleanup job at the end because it's a lot quicker. And today it's just too sloppy, so I'm not even going to mess with cleanup. But I am going to get as much as I can back in that pile. And then and I find that no matter what I do, every bit of this pile will be used to be sold, you know, probably by next year, easily. You know, getting rid of it's really not that hard. And then whatever I don't sell, I just put it in another pile and continue on. So this is what's nice about the manure. You're never losing money on it. And some people will say, well, I live in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's going to want my manure. Well, if you live by a town and people are gardeners and you sell good quality products, I have to beg to differ, because I have sold manure to people that are living in a very rural area, and the biggest complaint is people in their area aren't marketing their manure. They may have cows, they may have big dairy farms, they may just be putting it on in their fields, and they really don't find it's really necessary or cost effective in their minds to even sell it to the local people. And I think that it's a good market, and it's something that I would be definitely interested in doing. And that's why I do it. Now, I'm not in the middle of anywhere, but I'm not also by the city. I'm like an hour from Cleveland, and I've had people drive 45 minutes just to pick up manure. And I know there's people closer to them, or there's a lot of commercial locations, but I think a lot of people prefer to go, you know, to the farm, I guess you want to say. And I think that they're happier with that. And that I do like, because again, it gives you a little bit more of a relationship with, you know, your patrons. So pretty much this is the end of one of the piles. I just want to kind of give you a quick shot of how this works. Definitely have to clean up a little on that edge. I do realize too, over time when I was working hay piles and we were trying to break that up, it really took a lot of effort. You get a lot of material and you try to get rid of it, and it's not always that easy. as far as like, you know, getting it to break up and to break down. So this is one pile right there. Now we're going to go work this pile. Now this pile here was all hay. So you're going to see a lot more hay, a lot more debris in it. And in this pile, I'm sure is cold. This is a pile that I was telling you that I might be moving this and do this more of a topsoil blend, because it's a hay manure mix. The problem is I got a lot of this was from a few jobs, and they didn't take the plastic from the hay off, and there's a lot of string. So that's why, another reason I want to run it through the screener. But I have never really tried to sell manure that was screened, and I think I might do that this year, see how that works. The kicker on that is that the drier it is, the better, but I think if it goes through the screening process, it'll be quicker. Now, I'm actually pretty happy with this so far, because as I'm digging, there was a lot of hay that was in here. I mean, this is pretty much I don't know, probably 15 to 20 round bales that were thrown in here, and they're all gone now. And then I mixed a little bit of some manure and a little bit of chips, and it really came out really nice. But look at all these strings. Definitely need to be screened. But I'll tell you what, screening is really kind of a cool deal, and it really makes, you know, maybe for manure it might not be a big deal for a lot of people, but when it comes down to topsoil, oh my gosh, working with screened topsoil is like working with sand. It's wonderful, you know, and that's really makes a difference. And I'm going to start doing that too with clay, because a lot of people, they want to use topsoil to fill in holes, and it's actually, they really should be using the topsoil for the top and using, you know, clay for the base. It'll make their life a little bit easier. Well, this pile is definitely ready for processing. I tell you, it looks really good. Real good. I don't really see any hay. There's worms in it, so we got that going for us. So regardless, worms are good. I'm impressed. This pile really looks good. Very, very, very good. Very good. Not happy with all the strings. I tell you, there's a lot of people that do horses and cattle. They don't take the strings off, and I tell you what, not only is it just a detriment to the animals, but it's a detriment to this manure business. It doesn't really do you any good. So what's good about doing and always mixing your piles too, you're always giving your outside area a chance to develop. And what I'm going to try to do is get this pile kind of kicked over. See all that big plastic? Definitely needs screened. Kind of disappointing. I really like piling my piles up tall, and I don't know. I think you just kind of keep them tight and tall, and I guess I think it works better because it's always getting all that heat to generate in compost. So you can go long and make rows if you choose. But like I say, as long as you can keep them tall and keep a lot of material in there, I think you're going to get a really good result. And I think that's part of the success that I'm having with what I'm doing, is the more I can kind of keep these piles tall, they're going to compost themselves real well. And I do, like I say, I religiously flip these things, and I think that really makes a difference too, is trying to keep your stuff, maintained. Well, there you have it, guys. I really don't want to kind of bore you watching me do this. I got a lot more to do. But I just want to give you a taste of what it's like to sit there and, flip these piles around. And the more you flip and the more you do it, the better off you'll be. And it is a little timing, but it's well worth the investment, I think. Because when you make a good quality product, you're going to get good quality results, and you're going to have repeat customers. And I find this to be an enjoyment because it's actually something a little different. So here's one pile that's been flipped out, and it looks pretty good, and it'll be ready for this year. I didn't really see a lot of heat in that, so I know that one's ready to go. So that's a good thing. So that's one pile that's been moved. Here's the one we started with, and here's the other one that was basically all hay. Both of them are in good shape, and I think that they'll be ready to market pretty much this year. It's just good to get that little flip out and get them turned, and it makes a big difference. So here we have those ready to go, and it just gives you a basic idea of some of the stuff that I deal with, trying to get rid of, in my composting process. It works out pretty well for me. Then eventually, once it dries out, I'll clean up all the stuff down at the base where the machine was, but it's not going to do any harm right now. Here's that small pile that was mostly wood chips and manure that was screened. Now it's only been out for about a year. It looks really pretty good and well broken down. So it really didn't seem that hot either. So see how this all undertakes as the time goes on. But again, it's another pile that's marketable. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video on how I do my composting process on my farm. There's no reason not to turn and flip your manure piles and do it at least 4 or 5 times a year. It really makes a big difference. Your piles will be nicer, and again, it's another income stream for your farm. And if you don't want to sell it, use it for yourself. And but the key is flipping them. I don't even care if I spread them on my fields. If you maintain them like this, and you can flip them around and really break them down, they're going to really be a better soil amendment than putting down hot, fresh manure. And this is really good stuff. And if you maintain it properly and create your own blends, you'd be surprised what you can come up with. But this is a good income stream. Works out good for me, and I'm kind of glad I did it. But that's some of the things that I do. That's how I manage my piles right now. And I'm going to be more refined over the next year or two once we kind of reorganize our process here. But this is really what I'm doing right now, and it's really cost effective. And you know, having the right tools does make a difference. You know, but you could still do it at a smaller scale. You don't have to do the scale that I do. But you know, I grew from small and got bigger. And you know, if you get into this, you may do also the same thing. So with that said, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Be safe.